Hello everyone, welcome to another daily Muppet. Today I'm going to cover some of the basics on what's happening with the manager situation again, and talk about Harry Kane, Darwin Nunez, Anthony at Ajax, and explain a couple of things regarding the transfer plans for this summer. So let's get into it. In the last video, I mentioned that there's really nothing to worry about with regards to the perceived delay with the manager situation, that essentially they're just going through their basic process of due diligence to narrow down the targets for the next manager. They've obviously been talking about this four-man list. Erik ten Hag, Mauricio Pochettino, Luis Enrique, and Lopetegui. And I think everybody kind of knew, all right, two of those are extremely unlikely and two are really the main names, but that doesn't mean they didn't want to go through it and do it properly and actually complete the whole process in a manner that was professional with all avenues checked out. There's nothing really dramatic going on. They're just checking out all the targets. The other day, they put out information yesterday to rule out Lopetegui as well as Luis Enrique, officially stating that he is out of the running and narrowing it down now to the final two, Pochettino and Ten Hag. While we all knew that those were likely to be the two targets for probably months now, the club were determined to follow through with their due diligence, with their plans, with their discussions and interviews, and talk to under candidates until they have done so and nailed it down to just those two. They made basic inquiries on Thomas Tuchel, but were immediately told he expected to stay at Chelsea and even potentially get another deal under the next manager. He's been very loyal to Chelsea at this stage, so that was why that died extremely fast. Right now, it's all going to plan. I think they're nailing down all the decisions that need to be made across the board with respect to the manager and coaches, anything. There's a lot that goes into hiring a manager. They do have time. There isn't a big rush, despite the rush from fans. So long as they've made their decision and can make their decision, the rest isn't really that urgent overall. One question that remains is, will they or have they already had that meeting with Pochettino? As mentioned by a few journalists in the last week to 10 days, they still wanted to have that interview face-to-face, ideally with Pochettino. There was a report that came out on Monday night that there was a meeting with Pochettino, further discussions, and then yesterday morning, one from Colin Millar at the Mirror reporting on this said the same thing, that it was first reported in France that they believe he's also had that meeting now. There have not been any other reports yet on this, so it's a little bit difficult to confirm whether that is true, whether they have had that meeting. I asked a few journalists about this through Twitter, and so this isn't my information. I've asked a couple other people and haven't heard back yet. They said there was a face-to-face meeting with Pochettino. These journalists on Twitter, I'm not going to put their information out. It's from them. If they want to put it out, they can. And so it's a little hard to confirm or say whether this is true, but I have been told by a couple of journalists, not my information, theirs, that this meeting has occurred face-to-face with Pochettino. I don't know who it was with, whether it was further with Murtaugh or whether it had moved on to Richard Arnold. If there was a face-to-face meeting, you would imagine it would have to do with Richard Arnold, as that was apparently the next step in the interview process after speaking with Murtaugh for weeks or even months over the past few. So we'll see what comes out, if anything, on that. The next story, now that it's been narrowed down to the two, of course, is likely to narrow it down to just the one that they are intending to pursue. I do not know if it'll be something to the nature of they've agreed to join at the end of the season, or if it'll be more something as United have determined, XYZ, Erik ten Hag to be the next candidate and will intend to complete a deal at the end of the domestic season. But I expect that to be the next report on the manager. So let's see what happens there, if anything comes out further about this reported meeting with Pochettino. Moving on to transfers, as there is some news there. There's news today on Harry Kane and Darwin Nunez, so it's important to discuss both of these. What I absolutely do know, and I've been saying for a few months, is that Harry Kane and Nunez are the main striker targets, and I want to break each of them down. Harry Kane. I mentioned prior that United were interested and that they were looking to offer players. We talked about this in one of the earlier videos. This has now been reported multiple times that they're interested, and today it's finally come out that they're looking to offer players. The report today from Rob Dawson at ESPN states that the valuation is over $100 million. They'd be willing to offer Tony Martial to try and reduce that fee. My understanding is there are multiple players that they would be looking to offer, one being Tony Martial, the other being Donny van de Beek, and potentially Dean Henderson. Overall, they're looking to potentially get that fee down in that 50 to 60 range in terms of cash for Harry Kane, should they want to pursue that deal and see if they can get him to come in. One thing people start worrying about is that, I don't want to spend on Harry Kane because that means we're not going to address the midfield, and that is not the case. The budgets are positional, and I'll talk about that a bit more later, but have talked about that prior. The budgets are positional. They have budgets and plans based on each area, the midfield and the forward position. A purchase of Harry Kane would not really affect the purchase of the midfield. Overall, the midfield is still the priority and still will be addressed. The defensive midfield position is priority, and alongside striker, they are looking at those. So I'll break that down just a little bit more in a moment, though. In terms of a Kane deal that isn't totally Pochettino tied, as I've said, he is a club target. But it would be harder to get him and have him push to join United without Champions League or Pochettino as the manager. The initial inquiry was even requested by Pochettino during initial talks with Murtaugh in February. And I was told last night there was a conversation. United may already be checking some of the further steps out with regards to Harry Kane, looking at medical records and things like that. So the interest in Harry Kane is very, very real. The thing is if Declan Rice were to join as the top target from the midfield, as we talked about before, it would not be for $150 million. It's not a viable deal unless it is for a more affordable price. So it's not like, we'll buy Kane for $100 million and then cannot buy a midfielder. It really doesn't work that way. Overall, between sales, between outs, and all of these things, the net budget, could still be easily 100, 125. There's a lot of free agents leaving, and that would be doable even with both Kane and Rice. If you think about all the sales, Van de Beek, Martial, Matic, potentially Andreas Pereira, Axel Tuanzebe, Brandon Williams. He doesn't want to come back and sit on the bench at United. We have 2 left backs. We have 2 right backs. He's likely to be sold in that case. There are a lot of funds potentially made available from sales this summer. So don't overthink it too much yet. We'll see what happens in the ensuing months, but it is a legitimate interest. Darwin Nunez, as I reported, he's around 60 million. The Telegraph today comes out and says he's a 60 million rated player, that Benfica want a deal early, that Arsenal are in talks, that Atletico are leading the chase, but Man United's interest is very real and they've discussed things with his agents. Absolutely true. We've talked about this now for a long time, and that these meetings were planned for March. I think I tweeted that out back in February. There is a complication in that Mendes is not his agent, but is trying to broker a deal to clubs in England and in Spain and get involved, as he usually does with anything out of Portugal. He likes to get his hands in it. This is actually complicating the deal at the moment, as it's creating a bit of an issue between him and the current agent, and is making the reporting a bit funny as well. I don't know. The other thing that was in that report was that it would be required to get Champions League to bring him in. I don't know if that's true or if that's just a bit of a story to keep interest in for Atletico and other clubs. I have asked about this, and I will see if I can get an answer. If I do get an answer, it will be a sure thing. But we'll see. Yes, Atletico are very interested. Arsenal are interested. There are a few other clubs interested as well. He's going to be a hot commodity. United would need to move quickly on a deal to get it done. And I still would prefer them to pursue a Darwin Nunez for the summer to Harry Kane. I think it's a better deal for the long term. One other player I want to mention this summer is Antony again. There was a report from James Ducker at the Telegraph that if Erik ten Hag came in, he would be of interest, and I mentioned that a few weeks ago, in the beginning of March as well, that he would like to bring him in if he does join. He's viewed as a replacement for number 11. Interest is there, and it's real if Ten Hag comes in. So how could we afford that? How could United make a deal like that happen? Essentially, you've got your top defensive midfield target in Declan Rice, your top striker target in Harry Kane. They're very expensive. With outs, you could get both if the prices make sense, if West Ham don't get Champions League. But if they're not obtained, they'll move on to secondary targets, and that may allow for secondary purchases in each area. So you might say Declan Rice or, Yao Paulinho and Amadou Hadara in the midfield, 2 players, right? Some of that depends on James Garner as well. And this could be the same in the forward position. If you cannot get Harry Kane, maybe you get Darwin Nunez and you move on Tony Martial and you can get Antony in as well. So, that's where there's kind of a little bit of a mixture of the plans. The interesting part there as well is, it's been reported from Ducker that Ronaldo is choosing to stay in some other places. There's some reports casting doubt on that. With Ronaldo, you never know. So I still think he's likely to stay. If something were to change or the club said, look, we can get Harry Kane and you don't need to stay, we'll get you a deal, get you a move elsewhere, that could make things a little bit easier too. I mean, it's a massive amount of wages, 30-40 million a year in wages. So we'll see. But yes, there's potential for 2 purchases in each area. So that's all the main news I have for today. I will update the chart later with what I expect based on latest news and what I'm hearing to help everybody kind of sort through the plans. And that's it for today. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn your notifications on, and I'll see you in the next video.